you know, because we've been, because of CppCon, we've been getting a lot of requests from students in the college who are attending college, you know, saying, well, a lot of the jobs are saying we need 5 years plus experience and things like that, and how do I overcome that? And so I found the secret to doing that. In my last interview, basically I just said, oh, I know this person who's doing this, and I know this person who's doing that, and I know this person who's doing that, and I also asked tons of questions like, well, if you're doing multi-threading, are you concerned about this? And, you know, what side of the stack are you looking at? The hardware, the software, the firmware? So these are things that you get as you are progressing through your career, but maybe you can do some short-circuiting of that so that you can actually get a job much quicker. So, as I said, my presentation focus was designed for more young engineers or college students so that they can figure out how to enter the marketplace. I'm going to give some tips basically for all engineers, not just, or for anybody really, not just C++, but because I've dealt a lot with C++, I can give some more tips towards that field than other fields. And so we're going to go beyond the cliches and try to get some real world examples. And there's one of the professors that I've been working with.
I tried.
Daniel. Yeah, where you didn't contact me. So basically, you know, you can read a lot of articles and they'll say, well, learn this or do that, but it's a complicated process. It's not just a simple snap your fingers and you'll get a job. You have to really work hard to do that process. Going through getting your resume ready, getting the interview, doing the interview, and even after the interview, you have to be concerned about how to work once you get your new position. So one of the things that I wanted to say was that you got to be dynamic. You always have to be moving. One of the things that I've learned is that bacteria doesn't like running water. So one way to kill off bacteria is to keep moving, keep flowing. So one of the ways to be aggressive in the field and trying to get a position or anywhere, even a PhD position, is that you need to be dynamically active in the field of your interest. Be passionate about it. If you go into an interview or if you're writing up a resume that basically is like reading a novel, a long novel, it's basically going through the facts rather than just saying, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I did, and this is how I did it. People aren't going to notice you. So you have to be passionate. Be proactive. Get out there in the community. Get to meet people. Like I said, my past interview, I basically said, oh, I know this person's working on this, and this person's working on that, and this person is working on this. And the guy was like, oh, okay, well, I won't ask you any more questions about that. And the final thing I'd like to say is be fearless. If you're going to an interview thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this position or whatever, you probably won't. So you need to show that you're not worried about what you're going to have to face. You have to show them that you are willing to take on any challenge. So here's some tips. Watch the markets. Like 2 years ago, it was difficult for entry-level engineers to join the workplace because there wasn't a lot of positions. And 2 years ago, employers could wait. You know, they could interview 100 people and still not hire somebody. I know Lloyd said he went through a lot of interviews with one of his groups, and basically they finally just gave up and said, "You're breathing, you're hired," you know. But
No, actually, they gave up and closed the position in a couple of cases.
but that happened 2 years ago, where the economy was not geared towards the younger generation. However, things have changed right now. I've been looking at Indeed.com and a lot of these other websites, and their entry-level positions are popping up everywhere. So now the market is very open to that kind of your level of need, or your level of competence. So what to do when it is tough time, because the economy will be cyclical, and we will have peaks and valleys. So, number one, I say need to play the long game. How are you positioning yourself to be able to get those positions? Are you writing blogs? Are you working on projects? Are you considering like 3 areas of interest? Maybe like for me, when I was in college, PR was popular. And then it went down because the hardware wasn't accessible at the time to even handle what we currently do in computations. Now VR is swinging back up, but yet I feel that's going to go through another peak, a valley, because right now we still don't have the hardware to even do AR. So, but we're going that direction where it's going to go up, but we're going to have these peaks and waves. So what do you do in the meantime? Work on C++, work in embedded, work in robotics, IoT, work web pages, network stacks, whatever, financial. There's plenty of areas that you can look that will help you grow in an area of interest, but maybe not in your specific area that you're passionate about. You need to network. The great thing about C++ today is that we are definitely working on our networking capabilities. CppCon, C++ Now, the ISO committee, everything is geared towards having young people actually contribute to these conferences, these standards, so that we're not just saying, oh, you have to have been working a long time and you have to be a PhD or something like that. They're not making those kinds of silos for the C++ community. They're trying to expand it so that more and more people will be using it. And you may need to move. I moved from Chicago to here, and it was the best thing that I had to do at the time. It wasn't easy, but we have to move, maybe to where the area is that where you're passionate about.
I'm sure you miss the winters, they're terrible.
I sure love snow. but the housing value in Illinois is due to the politics there. So. But we won't go into that. You may need to take a position with less pay. If you're very passionate about something, Amazon may be offering you a high salary, but it's not in your area of interest, and you decide, no, I'm going to go here because it's a step. And so the shorter, it's not the big step, but it's a step on the way. But sometimes you need to evaluate your resources, do you have the money? And your parents, are you going to live with your parents? Or how are you going to handle the long-term planning? Another thing you do is need to make yourself visible. If you're invisible, nobody's going to notice you. Even when you put out your resume, and as somebody who's made a name for themselves through another group or something like that. Just talking about Chris, he said that he had worked at Nintendo, and because he had already worked there previously on the same technology, it was easier for him to get through the door, because they said, hey, you already know this stuff. So that's some of the things that you need to do as a graduate. or even in college, just need to figure out ways to make yourself visible. I know that, and work in some phone calls with SG14. Some people from DigiPen did a paper on some data structure. So it's possible. You may need to take positions that are not in your area of interest. I know that for myself, I was going into C# and web development, but that wasn't really where I wanted to be. But at the time, I had to work by joining organizations such as Northwest C++ Users Group or CppCon to actually get my C++ knowledge, but yet work in these other areas that weren't my main area of interest. And I know that Lloyd would like this one, is get contract work. You know, there's a lot of, especially out here, thanks to Microsoft, is that there's a lot of contracts. You can get short-term contracts, you can get long-term contracts. You don't have to, that means you're not tied to the company itself or its vision. So that means that you can have some more free time to pursue your goals.
So let me drill down on that one for a sec, Brett, if you're okay with that.
Go ahead.
So excuse me, on the contract stuff, typically the interviews are a lot easier, and a lot of people now are hiring contractors with intent to hire full-time. So the contracting is starting to become a pre-screen for full-time. So they'll hire a bunch of contractors. The ones who do good will be offered full-time, occasionally within a couple of months, and the rest will just finish out the contract and move on. And now, you know, it depends on if you want to be hired on. I always ask that too, but it's another trend I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, now that you know, the place I work, I know that we have high employee turnover, but you know, getting new people, there's more jobs today, openings, than there are people qualified for those positions. So today is a great time for you to get the position you really want. But maybe there's something that, like I said, VR is very much of interest to me. And it's not where it needs to be really something that's a viable technology still. So maybe do things like firmware, sim programming, algorithms, things like that is just some keys that you can get so you can, when the time is that it does become hot and heavy, that you'll be ready. So another thing that you need is confidence. How do you gain confidence in any economics side? Well, one thing that you can do, and I know that I've talked to a lot of people, is they do some projects like Arduino. They get an Arduino board. It's not costly, easy to build apps on it, run it, say, hey, I know something, you know. And it gives you some confidence that you built something, you deployed it, it's working. Now, of course, Arduino made it easier. They put a wrapper around the real low-level stuff, but you're no longer having to take your stopwatch and make sure the interrupt fires at the right time, stuff like that. So we're not doing that kind of work anymore. Be honest with yourself. Know what your weaknesses are. If you know what your weaknesses are, you should try to solve them. Don't say, hey, I don't have to worry about this. If this is something you're passionate about, get on those weaknesses. And this one I've learned for many years is don't expect anyone to help you. If you are expecting somebody to sit there and help you, you're going to be disappointed many, many times. So you've got to have the self-initiative to do the work. Then, when you're starting to get somewhere, somebody will go, hey, you can do it this way, and here's how we'll do it. So you have to make the first steps. And there's things like building a network of people that you can point to as a subject matter expert. Like I was saying, I know the person who does ranges. I know the person who's doing coroutines. I know the person who's doing modules. You know, and it's great that you can do that because you can say, I may not know everything, but I know the people who do, and I can get their help if I need it. Give a presentation on anything. If you want to get some confidence, get up in front of people, start talking. That's one thing that you can do to help yourselves when you're doing an interview. So you don't have to be like worried or frightened. Write a paper. There's plenty of ways down with new technologies. Internet's been out for a long time, but blogs, yeah, go ahead.
I want to add that writing a paper, I guess shouldn't mean like an academic paper, but you can write any article and post it on Reddit or Hacker News. There's no barrier to entry at all.
Right. And
it's a great way to, put your name out there.
so, yeah, you can get a blog through Yahoo, you can get a website through all these, create a website, do a bunch of stuff where you can get your name out there. There's Stack Overflow. Yes.
I'll just throw out too, one of the things hiring managers look for right now is can you write? Because if you can actually write and you can do code,
Yeah.
you are a step ahead.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big thing that people look for.
Wow, they finally figured that out?
It took 30 or 40 years.
It's nice to hear now that I'm, kind of in the twilight of my career.
And with writing, you could write a blog or answer a question on a Q&A forum or write an application around the concept. Yes, well.
The other half of this is read the papers, read the blogs, read the books.
Very good.
Yes. Okay, you're the reading.
Yeah.
Not just reading, but comprehending it. So.
Yeah, but starting with reading it.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to point down on that, if you're going to write anything that's in the public forum, do the research and make sure you're correct.
Yeah.
Because if you put something out there that's blatantly incorrect, it's not a case of any publicity is good publicity. Bad publicity is not good here.
You can always delete it if it's your blog.
Well, that's true.
You're quick enough.
Of course, they always say networking is one of the most important keys to getting a position. If you read many of the blogs that are out there, or many of the career papers, they always say networking, networking, networking. And so we're going to give you a few examples. CppCon, if you want to network with other fellow engineers in the C++ world, this is one of the main events. If you're interested in Python, PyCon. If you're interested in Java, I'm sure you can, there's plenty of conferences out there.
There's a JavaCon somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are conferences year-round, and then there's ACCU, there's Meeting C++, there's meetings all around the world. There's examples of users groups, like our user group, Northwest C++ Users Group, that you can interact with people who have been in the industry for a while and can give you some good technical information. You can create a hackathon, which I tried to do, but, well. Another thing is work with your own student, work with other college-age students, assist them to be best prepared for the job market as well. You can learn more through teaching than you can do by doing it yourself, because sometimes you're not prepared you're not thinking, oh yeah, this is a way that it could be done. You're thinking, oh, I'm doing it this way. This is the only way that I've learned. Well, somebody could have done it another way and it'd be more efficient. And you go, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? So, be willing to learn is be willing to teach. And so, like I said, assist them with opportunities like networking, volunteer for conferences, user groups, and even be a tutor. And again, because networking is so important, I had to have 2 slides on this. Like I said, become a teacher or a mentor. You know, my son's karate teacher said that he learned 80% of his karate on his own, but he learns 20% more by teaching. And he learns that because not only does he teach the kids how to do that, sometimes the kids will do something that he goes, wow, I didn't even think of that. That's a great move, you know? So you can learn by being a teacher. And another thing to do is to meet the movers and shakers of the industry that you want to pursue. Get their email. I've asked people for their email. Ask questions. Ask if there's a publication you need proofreading or testing or something. One of the people that was part of our group came to one of our meetings that Scott Myers was presenting. Scott Myers was writing a book. She said, hey, can I proofread it? And I mean, she didn't know anything about C++14, but she could proofread it. And so she learned, not only did she learn C++14, she got a great recommendation from Scott Myers. So just to give you a lighter side, I know that engineers, they like to look at their computers and they're thinking that all they're doing is coding and that's it, but really, honestly, you have to consider the salesmanship of it. And there's a Dilbert's theory of why salespeople make more money. So he was using the equation that power is equal to force times velocity. And so if you break down velocity, it's distance divided by time. And so he said that knowledge is equal to power and time is equal to money. So that money is equal to force times distance divided by knowledge. Therefore, as knowledge approached zero, you made more money. This is true, because salespeople know how to deal with people. That's how they make their sales. They don't care about the intrinsics of the product. They care about how to get the person to open up their wallet and pay the money.
So is that why senior developers make more money than junior developers because they're going senile and forgetting everything?
Yeah, that's right. Practice, practice, practice. You know, the best thing that you can sit there and say, oh, I know this stuff, or I can do this. I don't need to worry about that. But a great example is my son's music store owner. He and I were talking. He said that one time he went to this training weekend on how to play the drums, and there was a very prominent drummer who was teaching this course, and basically, the owner of the store at the time, he said, so how do I get better? And so basically the teacher of the class says, you need to practice. And so the guy goes, that's it? And the guy goes, yes, you need to practice, practice, practice. This was a big guy, he said. It was like putting his finger in his face. And he said, he got the point that the way to be a best drummer is not just talent, it's practicing. And if you don't practice, you won't get better. So I'll give you some interview tips from some of the interviews that I've had. I know that a lot of people have these technical interviews or whiteboarding. I know that some people are getting away from that, but I'm sure that you'll still get some of those questions like how many quarters of ice, how many quarters would you have to fill up a whole ice rink with, and so you have to think some of these things through. But if you're going for an interview and using assembly or assembler, you probably will be focusing more on the stack and bit manipulation. You'll also have to understand how C++ will pass parameters via the stack and local variables. And you also have to consider instance versus static. In C++, I've noticed that most of the questions have been about data structures, mostly on linked lists. They rely heavily on queue and stack, which are basically variations of linked list. And
I'd like to know, why is there so much of a fetish over linked lists? I mean, it's a joke in my class when I teach it, and I've had students, anyway, I won't get into talking about it, but, and me too, and I've gone on interviews, they ask me, well, how would you implement a doubly linked list? I said, well, why should I care? It's already implemented for us.
Which is the right answer.
Well, yeah, but I didn't get the job. And
That's 'cause it's not.
I do a lot of interviewing of people, and that's the, linked list is a quick test you can do in about 15 minutes. Either someone knows it or they don't. It demonstrates
Well, that's-
memory management, pointer manipulation, indirection, and if they can do, you wouldn't believe the number of people that can give every book answer exactly right, but you ask them to go up on a whiteboard and they can't figure out how to write a pointer or a struct to do your node for each link on a line. It's a quick weed out, and it shows that they understand a little bit of memory management and pointers. If you don't know pointers, you can't do C++.
like I said, well, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I mean, that begs the other question. It's like, I'm in quantitative development, applications, finance, banking, that sort of thing. So why do we care about pointers anymore? We have unique pointers.
It all builds on that, on the same concept. It's like, would you want an architect that doesn't know how to build a foundation?
That's fine. I'm thinking more of an application developer.
No, when I said architect, I'm actually talking about an architect that builds a building. That you kind of have to know it all to be able to understand what's happening underneath, to know how to use it. How would you implement one of these collection classes to understand how to use it the best? Why is a list versus a vector versus an array? You can use an array all you want, but you have to keep doing all the reallocation on it, or a vector, or actually an array you have to pre-allocate. But the linked list, why is that good and not if it's highly dynamic? Or
Yeah. I guess, again, I'll shut up after this, but never once in my 20 years of experience of quant development have I ever had to use a linked list, ever. Always, it's vector or map, that's it.
Well, I'm going to argue with you a little bit. I've been involved in optimizing code forever, and I found that people who don't know how things are implemented are never successful at optimizing code. And if you need your code to run fast, you've got to know how the stuff works under the hood, and you've got to be willing to look at the assembler output of the compiler, or your code just is not going to be able to compete with it. So you talked about quant work.
Right.
And quant work is very performance sensitive,
I know.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And if,
I know,
and if
but-
you don't know how to build a linked list, or know why linked lists are actually inefficient for quant work.
Well, that's kind of been established, and so therefore,
Yeah, I mean, you should use it.
we don't care.
Well, to me, it's like, I read this book on Formula One racing with Nicky Lauda.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a winning driver, not because he was better than other drivers, but he understood how the car worked better than any of the other drivers. And so he was able to get that last 1% out of it that they couldn't. So,
Point taken, but it's just, I just am astonished at just all this, you say it's like a fetish over linked lists when, I've never even had to use one. But I
Well,
digress.
yeah, no, I sort of agree with your statement, and I sort of agree with your statement. It's just, well, basically, the issue is, the interviewer is just asking you a question, is basically told, you must interview this person because we're trying to hire somebody. So basically, the interviewer's just trying to get as much information that he can get in a short period of time without a lot of extra work for him. And
I know,
or
I've
her.
interviewed people, so yeah, I know.
And so, I mean, it's good to know these things, and it's somewhat, it's like, well, I can read a blog or something like that and just do the same thing. anymore.
Well, I had a point that's come up recently for me is, why do we focus so much on whiteboarding? Do any of us in real life write code on a whiteboard? Okay,
You
Walter.
write diagrams on a whiteboard.
Right, oh, we
It
diagram on a
represents code
whiteboard all, no,
eventually.
but I'm talking
Equations
about
make-
writing that linked list on a whiteboard.
No,
I do
yeah,
a
but I'm
lot,
explaining to people, I'll put stuff
Yeah.
on a, well, not necessarily a whiteboard,
Well,
but
there
a piece
are
of
also
paper.
interviews where they have people do it on a computer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
which is-
that's new though.
Yeah, no, and we're finding, with our students, we're finding more and more of that.
Yeah.
They're being
no,
interviewed, live
a fair
coding.
amount of the interviewing I do ends up being remote. And so we're doing some Skype thing and then a shared web interface. I mean, there are a lot of web pages that are compile time. Every keystroke, it recompiles it.
Mhm.
And we'll highlight errors and we'll actually execute the code for you when you tell it to. And it does all the highlighting the keywords and stuff. And so but it's easier sometimes than whiteboard to kind of do a lot of quick scribbling where when I have someone do whiteboarding, I don't expect that it's going to be compiled perfect, that they forget semicolons or they miss the initial capitalization or something like that. I just want to see that they understand the ideas behind it, not necessarily everything letter perfect.
Right. In the whiteboard interview specifically, though, it's not really a question about does the person understand it. It can, and I've seen this happen. It becomes almost more of a do you know this piece of trivia about, because the problem with the linked list and the fetishization of it is that it's become one of those things. Oh, just learn the linked list, learn these attributes about it, and you will pass every interview, right? Because it's so well understood where the pitfalls are that he, as a professor, can say, okay guys, learn this, do this way, understand these 5 points about it, and you will get an answer that will pass an interview, right? And maybe that's what you're working at, is because... Well, but because when you're sitting in a room across from somebody, there's no computer in front of you, none of what you actually do in your job is sitting in front of you, okay? What you're really asking as an interviewer then is, did you learn this trivia in college? Did you learn this trivia recently? And it's almost not about understanding anymore.
That's what I found in interviews.
Yeah.
Right, you're right, it's good that if they can show they understand it, but now, because everyone uses the same question, he can just say, okay, these are the 5 pain points, these are the 5 performance issues, he can put up 1 hour lecture on it, and these guys can videotape it, and he can go run the videotape right before the interview. You're smoked. You have no idea if the guy actually understands it, but he nailed everything about the linked list.
Well, that's what happened in one of the interviews I did. The guy, the recruiting team or the resource gave me the list of questions that the guy was going to ask, and I was like, well, I'm not going to really try to, but I perused it. So I got in there, I answered everything very quickly, and the guy was like, wow, you answered it so quickly. And I was like, well, I didn't say anything, and then another guy came in and he answered it much more quicker than I did. And he was like, wow, this guy is so great. You see?
And this is something that you see in any sort of standardized test, people start teaching to the test. And then people start passing the test without, really understanding why. And that, I think, as somebody who does care about low-level performance and, maybe understands it, okay, yes, I could sit down and explain it to you, but it's such a common question, I can just teach it to anybody and say, okay, here are all the problems with this that they could possibly ask you about in your interview. Just, here are your answers, go. And it's like that, and they'll nail the interview, and you just hired somebody who read a book, basically, and doesn't actually know what they're talking about.
Since we've gone entirely off the rails here, I'm going to throw out some more things. The linked list is a first question I use as a quick filter, but I always give a problem-solving type thing, something that has never been published before, where you make them think and speak out loud their steps that they're thinking and how they're trying to solve it.
And why they're taking each step.
And if they make a mistake, that's good if they can, but if they can justify it, and then you rip the carpet out from under them. But what if you can't do this, or you're in limited memory, or this or that? And see how they adapt to it, see if they can think on the fly. Because you know, none of the work we ever do is exactly out of the book. We have to reinvent the process every time. And I don't want to get into differences, but Western cultures are taught to think that way and solve problems, whereas Eastern are very, very good at rote memory. And they can give you every single equation to solve all these physics problems, but if you come up with a physics problem they've never seen, they can't solve it, because they don't know how to break it down into other problems that they do know how to solve.
It's true.
Thinking is more important than solving.
I work for a Chinese company. So continuing on, just for interview tips, yes, you've gotten a ton of tips already, but just give you some BSTs and to find max depth or print and order, which involves not only BST but some other data structures. In managed code, we're probably more focused on the string object and how to manipulate a string object, since that was a big thing that managed code did, was bring the string to life. So, talking about a place to get a lot of code, and some Indians designed a site and has tons of examples of how to do data structures, do printing, it's a vast database on all kinds of programming languages and data structures and things like that. And it's called geeks.org. If you want to learn all those things, go there. And if you want to learn some more intrinsic information about how to solve something, you can go to Stack Overflow and try to get some more in-depth knowledge about linked list. Like I said, there's C++ forums. Since they're trying to standardize a lot of things in C++ these days, it's definitely a great repository for getting a lot of information about why things are being done and why things are not being done in C++. Like, for example, the 2D graphics paper was killed.
Was it?
Yeah. And somebody wrote, "I'm glad it was killed." And so somebody replied back, "Well, we can always do tools for graphics, 2D graphics." And somebody said, "No, we're not gonna. That's not really gonna work." You know, so you can find out what people are thinking and what's the next steps in C++. You can also get Code Project has a daily newsletter, and you'll see like articles from Strauss Stroop and other people in the C++ community who are commenting on the new features and upcoming features. So, wow, I didn't think we'd last this long, but we did. So here's my conclusion. So like I said, we got to be persistent and learn the fundamentals. You got to be firm and don't be afraid, because there's always another day. I've gone to an interview where I was talking with the boss or the guy who was hiring manager, and he was putting down other employees while he was talking. He was like, "Oh, this person doesn't know this person," and I was like, "Well, I'll go for the interview. I'll take the flight. I'll get the hotel, but I really don't want this job because this is not a place I think is going to be really good to work at." So I practiced. I learned something. You know, I had my first trip, to Seattle. So, and now I'm here. So, so things can happen that you're not expecting that from these kinds of interviews that, you think, "Oh, this is a waste of time." No, practice. If you wish more training, you can contact me. I gave my website or my email address at the beginning. I'm always wanting to talk to people. I may not be able to answer you right away, but I will try to answer your questions. And so, this year, I decided to become a coach. And this is the result of my being coach, is being a champion. This
You got a
year,
ring too?
yeah, well, we won the city championship for Sammamish, and we got the league championship for our league. So I had never coached, and I knew something about baseball, but I never played baseball. So I wanted my son to learn, so I said, okay, I'll be coach. I got in the room with the other guys, we're doing the draft, I'm seeing these players, and I'm choosing them, and I'm like, we're going to be a championship team, and we were. And it was a great season to learn how to deal with 8 to 10-year-olds and their parents.
The parents are worse than the kids.
Yeah, I have some stories, horror stories, but we won, so it was great. But I would always tell them 3 things you need to do. Number 1 is communication. Say, I've got the ball, or, plays up 1, or something like that, so that all the rest of the team will know what to do. When the ball comes to you, where are you going to throw the ball? What are you going to do, how are you going to make sure that nobody interferes with you? How many outs are there? If you don't know how many outs there are, you're going to be out there forever. So you got to communicate. Second thing I told, and this was especially true of my son, because the ball would be flying over the plate, over his head, and he'd go swinging for it. I go, what are you doing? You're not gonna... He said, well, I want to hit the ball. I said, well, you're not going to hit the ball up here. So I said, he goes, yeah, but I really want to hit the ball. And I said, well, think of the team first. Get on the base. When you're on the base, you know what? You didn't get an extra out. The team is going to win, right? He goes, yeah, you're right. So think of the team first. When you're going for your interview, you're not getting a job just for yourself. You're not going to try to expand your knowledge and this and that. This is not a sandbox. This is a real world location. And the people who are hiring you are not hiring you because they think you're a nice person or something like that. They're hiring you because they have a need that they need to be completed because their boss is getting on them. So you need to think of the team first. And the last thing I'd always tell them is be self-disciplined. Don't be playing in the sand. Make sure you're watching what's going on. And the same thing, with work. Get to work when the work hours are required. Do your job, and you'll be successful. And the same thing with, doing your, getting practice for your interview and doing things like that. Be self-disciplined, and you'll be successful. And thank you very much for attending. And any questions or comments?
Just a couple comments. When people ask me what they should do, I always tell them that they should do 3 things. First is to buy yourname.com and put your resume on there, because then you control your own brand.
Yes.
When you do that. And you can and so when people Google search your name, they're going to find your website, which is about you and not what somebody else wrote about you.
Okay.
So that's the number 1. Number 2 is get a GitHub account under your own name, not under a pseudonym, under your name, because you want people to find it. Then when you contribute to an open source project, which anybody can do whether they have a job or not, that will build your brand. Or help build your brand. And the third thing, less important, is to get a Twitter account under your own name. Again, it's all about building your brand. So when somebody Googles your name, you control what your brand is, not somebody else, and you're not leaving it to chance. Okay, so those 3 things.
And I'd like to add another thing about resumes, because I've read a couple, and I was like, yeah, you told me what you did, but you didn't really tell me who you really are, And, so if somebody's reading 1,000 resumes and they see somebody who tells me who they are and how enthusiastic you are about this, they're gonna see that and they're gonna jump, they're gonna put you in the pile, yeah, interview this person. Where if they're reading something like War and Peace, oh yeah, okay, well, whatever. They're gonna throw it out, so.
When writing resumes, put your message in the first third of the first page, because if you don't grab their attention by then, you got like 7 seconds. They'll next.
It's not
If
7
you wait
seconds.
If you wait all the way to the end, yeah.
I've talked to recruiters. I'd say, how long do you spend on a resume? And they said 2 seconds.
Right. Well, 7 seconds is in person.
Okay.
But yeah, because if you don't grab their attention, you won't.
Right.
And if you just have a cookie cutter resume, it looks like everybody else's, and don't use the word objective at the top.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're saying I'm trying to apply for a job. Well, everybody knows that you're applying for a job.
The resume at the top. That says so.
Say, I am this kind of engineer who's done X, Y, and Z, and this is how I did it, and that will definitely get you through.
Although definitely saying what you want to do is also part of that mix.
Yeah, but I mean, that could probably be inferred through what you've done. Like if you're saying I did a computer programming and I want to keep doing, I've done it this way and stuff like that, they'll realize that you want to be a software developer. So.
I'd like to comment on sort of the other part of this. A lot of this has been about how to present yourself in order to get the interview or get the job. The other half of that is how to develop yourself so that you will deserve the job. That if you can commit yourself to always learning, always reading the books, understanding the books. Yes, you have to do stuff. Absolutely, you have to do stuff. But as a complement to while you're doing stuff, you always have to be learning the new stuff, which means you always have to read the books. You can read blogs and articles and all of that, but basically keep yourself up. Make sure that you know what's current. Make sure that you know what's the state of the art. Read the books.
Well, you're always learning. Like this year, I worked on SIMD assembler, and on computer vision algorithms. Then now I'm working on Java apps for machine learning to test different prediction models. So I'm always keep moving.
Yeah.
That's why I said be dynamic, always be moving.
You are not the same person you were last year.
Right.
Make sure that that's always true.
Yes.
There's a question about that. So I have one more class and then I've got my BS and
Then you can
computer
get
science.
started learning.
But I'm also, I also find myself quite a bit older than your average college graduate coming out. I'm curious what, I also notice I'm possibly one of the young ones here.
Yeah.
No offense to anyone.
I think you are the target audience for this presentation.
Yeah, so that's kind of my question, comment, like what's this world like now for an old, I'm not quite middle age. But I don't know.
What did you do before you
I have
finished your
3
degree?
degrees in music, and I've been a performing, composing musician most of my life.
Interesting. Yeah, just anecdotal, I did my first 2 years of music major, so.
All right.
There's an incredible
a lot of
number of
musicians.
history majors doing software.
Well, liberal arts, a lot of people who do liberal arts are pretty good at computer science. Again, it's a logic.
Music is special. Music
Right.
is
Special.
Yeah,
music is
Well,
something
here's-
else. I'm a musician too, and so is my
There's a lot
whole
of math
family.
behind music.
Yeah.
Well, I think, because I was in it too, I see a definite mapping. I see absolute advantages for you. The problem is a lot of employers won't, because it gets back to, you've got to know how to show me how to implement a linked list. Okay, but what about this, you know, in music, there's form, you were in composition. When you're writing a program, it's like writing a composition. Each class has a theme, right? This sort of thing. I mean, I could go, you get where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can understand completely how you made that transition, why you would be good. But how do you convince an employer who knows nothing about music, doesn't know tonic from subtonic, and you know, it's just that list. I think that's the problem. That's the problem you're going to have. Even though I think you really probably do. You probably have a really deep understanding.
Technical employers who know nothing about music are rarer than you might think.
Oh, I know. I worked with a lot of. I mean, it was interesting how many musicians there were, but there are a lot at the top.
But knowledge of music gives you an advantage. For example, the guy who invented auto-tune made a fortune. So did the guy who invented Shazam. And these were people who knew something about music. I never could have invented that stuff because I don't know anything about music.
Yeah, well, that might be more your thing than to do your own thing, because.
I mean, make software for bands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there.
There's always the application level. Okay, you're not gonna get a career doing software development. You're going to get a career doing a particular application of software, a particular type of software.
Right, software for composers.
And if what you want is software for composers, then knowing about music is a big advantage. If it's acoustic software, learn some physics and some math, and you can do acoustic software. But software is not enough. You gotta have at least one additional subject area. Then you're gold. Because then you can, there's always, every subject area, or almost subject areas anyway, have a component for which software is really, really useful. And if you can overlap those, that's something you can market.
Yeah, I would much rather hire a well-rounded person they know a bit about a lot of stuff, not a jack of all trades, but that they can carry on a conversation with most anybody. They're not just total geek. If they're total geek, they can't deal with other people. So, but if you know enough other subjects, you can make yourself a subject matter expert, or you can come up to speed in a new area reasonably quick. If you understand math and physics and science, that covers half of what's out there.
So that's where I was going to go with a comment a couple minutes ago. When I'm hiring somebody, I'm actually not looking for what they know. I'm looking for two things. Can they learn and can they think? And I interview very specifically for those two things, because no matter what I hire them for this week, I've got them doing something else next week. And they need to be adaptable. And if they're going to grow, if I want somebody that's going to grow in the organization, they need to be able to learn. And today I need them to be able to think, because a lot of the stuff I do is R&D type in nature. You can't go look it up on the internet. It doesn't exist there yet. So I need them to go look up some stuff and figure that out. But you do get two different types of groups like that. So that's one camp. The other camp is they just want somebody to do production code and get something done. So that's another dimension to be thinking about.
I hear stuff from several people, I guess, that are in positions of hiring people, and what you're saying is like encouraging. But I'm just curious, are you guys outside of the norm of the industry? I feel like some of my friends now that are getting offers at like Intel and
We've got a pretty good. I mean, everybody else here is fairly senior, and I see a whole lot of different subject areas, which is this secondary subject area. I know several of these subject areas, and they're all different.
So let me just put it this way. In the last 5 years, I've worked in 3 massively different areas. Console games, virtual reality, specifically eye tracking, and satellite launch vehicles.
That's not a specialty exactly, except that.
But there is.
Yeah, oh yes, it's embedded system.
It's embedded systems and
That's your specialty.
and industrial automation, but
Yeah.
basically my two areas.
Yeah.
But the trick is being able to go into an organization, look at what's going on, figure out what needs to be done, and then go do it. But it's every one of those, that's the key. It's not necessarily doing one thing or the other. It's go figure out what they need to do. If you don't know the technology, which you usually won't because they're developing it, go figure it out, and then figure out how to apply it to solve the problem. And when I'm interviewing, that is the hardest thing I have to find. I can get people that can read me a textbook answer all day long. The minute I throw an application problem at them, they're done. And I mean, generally I'm seeing reject rates up in the 95 to 99% when you're looking for that type of person. So we will literally go through 100 people to find one. And it's the thinking and the critical analysis, or the critical thinking skills and the ability to analyze a problem. That's basically what knocks most people out. And when I do I'll do a whiteboard coding example. I specifically tell them, I don't care what language you do it in. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking, can you take a problem that I gave you? And just for reference, I use the Fibonacci Series, not the linked list, because most people haven't seen it. It's about a 5 or, depending on how you do it, 5 to 8 lines of code. That'll disqualify half the people because they can't go from a word description. And I give them 3 lines of the code. They really only have to fill in 2. And that'll knock most people out because they can't think their way through it.
One of the things you kind of had started your question off with by pointing out that you're at a different age than all these other kids that are just graduating.
Yeah.
That will actually be an advantage to you. You have some life experience. And when someone looks at you and this pimple-faced college kid next to you, they're going to expect you to be more experienced.
That's the other edge of the sword, though.
Yeah.
Because I've been in your situation.
Yeah.
I think that the best thing is that, like I said, be dynamic. Always be looking for the solution during the interview. When I did my last interview, I asked the interview, I think 100 questions about the architecture of the system and software around it. And he said, yeah, okay, I'm going to hire you. Because I asked him more questions than he asked.
Actually, let me expand on that, though, because I've seen that backfire one time, or a couple times. Asking questions to understand is great. Don't try to design the system for them if you don't know enough to really be doing it. So I've had a couple of people that came in and tried to tell me how to design the system, and they got it all wrong. Just because it's not because, it's like good points for trying, but they were making tons and tons of assumptions that were just totally off the wall.
Well, I was asking more questions like, well, how do you handle this?
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
But don't turn it around and say, well, you should be doing this. It's like, no.
Many of
As
them,
an interviewee, you don't know enough to be doing that yet.
when I'm doing interviews and I give someone a problem, I purposely don't give them enough information, or I don't give it all to them up front. I want to see how they think and what questions they ask to try and solve it.
Yep.
Because if they just dive into it, they're just going to dive into any problem without knowing where they're going or what they're doing. And if they start asking a bunch of questions and finding out, yes, I can do this, or no, I can't make this assumption, and stuff, so you got to ask a few questions up front to make sure first of all, you understand the problem. Echo the question back, and then ask enough to make sure that you understand. Yeah. They might be a moron doing the interview and not understand it themselves. And if you can bring that out, point out that their question is flawed, sometimes that works.
Yeah.
I've been given a written test before to do as an interviewer or interviewee. I corrected the questions and the problems and gave it back to them. I got the job. And the guy who wrote it ended up becoming one of my best friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look for jobs that for software related to music, you automatically have a big leg up on the competition because you know about music and they don't. You don't take
But you weren't
advantage of your
Guitar Hero.
specialized knowledge.
Also, I mean, it's been long known that there was a strong correlation between musical ability and programming ability.
Yeah.
So for me, knowing that, I would be biased toward, I would start out biased toward a musician. I don't know whether people in HR know that.
That was
or
my
some of the
point.
pre-screeners.
Well, but that's another point.
I would, but, you know.
Sometimes I go to people and I say, I learned Russian and Latvian in 4 months each. I was over in the Soviet Union. I learned it I worked with people who didn't speak English, and that was the best place. They didn't speak English, so I had to speak their language. That's something you can point and highlight for yourself, is I did something here that could be easily translated to this thing. I've already done it here, and it has a great correlation to here, and use that as a.
Yeah, Brett's pointed out to be dynamic. You let it read kind of what's current. Don't be the little kid that's always chasing the shiny ball. Because then you're going to look like a jack of all trades and master of none.
Right.
You want to specialize a little bit. Pick things that look like they have gained some traction. C++ been around for 30 years. It might stick around a little bit longer. Python is really getting a good foothold.
Huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's knocking
Guess
all
who's
these other
reading
languages.
the books
You
about
hardly see
Python
Java
as we speak?
anymore. It's dropping off the map really.
Really?
Java.
Java, yeah.
Those type. And in Python, it's quite powerful, and you can do a lot with it. And my last project, we did a lot of C++ to Python interoperability.
Maybe Python will end up saving C++.
It may become a hybrid at some point,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so that solves the 2D graphics problem. Just use Python.
Right, there you go.
Last question.
I just want to mention that we've touched on a different subject that could be interesting, and then we've not touched on one that you mentioned in the blurb on the internet, but we haven't really touched on. So the first was, we've touched on what should be taught. We've been talking about how people should be interviewing and whether linked lists are important or not, but I think there's whole questions of what should be taught to whom, computer scientists versus software engineers or whatever. The other subject was, how should people write job descriptions so they're actually useful to people looking
Sorry to
for
laugh,
jobs?
but
Well, no, I was just having that discussion today.
When they started writing these totally mysterious descriptions of what their companies did in the dot-com boom, I think that's bled over into job descriptions to where they just write this sort of meaningless trash.
or,
that-
must know these 10 languages,
It's kind of like you were saying.
15 years of experience for a language that's been around 5.
Be
I've seen
specific
that.
about what you've done
yeah,
as an
I see
author. Well, they're not being specific about, they're just
Well, a lot of times,
a bunch of
they gotta
boilerplate.
protect their own technology. If people found out that they were doing this exact thing, that could really be competitive and hurt them. The lawyers filter all these things. You get all these HR recruiter types that were selling refrigerators last week, and the week before that, they were graduating from as an English major. So a lot of them, they're just buzzword bingo.
Well, we had one recruiter that worked like 3 weeks. He was gone. I was like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
thank you.
And let's go get some more recruits.
Good discussion.